Despite the recognized importance of legislative quality, Nigeria faces significant challenges in its lawmaking process, and issues such as inadequate stakeholder engagement, limited capacity among lawmakers, and political interference can compromise the quality of legislation. So the quality of legislation profoundly influences the business environment and, by extension, the economic development of Nigeria. So well-crafted laws establish a stable environment conducive to investment, innovation, and sustainable growth, while poorly designed or implemented legislation can hinder economic progress. And so for today's session, we're going to delve into the relationship between legislative output and development in Nigeria, highlighting the relevance and transformative impact of quality legislation in ensuring a sustainable business environment and driving the nation's economic development. With us today, we have Honorable Reverend Francis Waive, representing Ughelli North, Ughelli South, and Udu Federal Constituency in Delta State. Good morning and welcome, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. So going straight to our questions for today. So the first question is, how would you define legislative quality, and how would you describe the current quality of legislation in Nigeria?
First, legislation is usually meant to cure a problem in society, to solve a problem that's noticed in society among humans as they relate. So when the legislation made is able to solve these problems, then it's of good quality. So the question now is whether the ones being made today in our country by the National Assembly is of high quality. If we look at the few in the 9th and 10th Assembly, for example, and the problems they've solved, we'll be able to say that, yes, quality is there, may not be perfect. There's no piece of legislation around the world that is perfect.
Yes, sir.
But you keep working on it as you implement law. You take, for instance, the NDDC law that was passed, one of the first law that, although it was vetoed by the president, the legislature went on to go ahead to get it passed without his assent. That law has needed to be amended one time or the other, but then it has served the people of the Niger Delta. So you will see the benefits that come out of that.
Such legislation.
Today we have the PIA that was passed in the 9th Assembly. I can tell you that the operators of this law, the organized private sector in the oil industry, they are today meeting. They've invited us to meet with them once. Now that they're operating the law, they are looking at how it is impacting on their operations. And they are now beginning to propose some amendments. And we're open to amendments because no law is perfect.
Yeah.
So, but if you find that this PIA is already impacting oil business, prospecting, both in the upstream, midstream, and downstream of the petroleum industry, you'll find that that law is of good quality. So I can go on to name such laws. So the quality of legislation in Nigeria, given the history of our democracy, you know, the legislature is the first casualty whenever there is a military coup. So the experience has not built up like you have in the judiciary, where whether there's a coup or not, the judges keep on being there.
Yeah.
You know, so for the 25 thereabout years of unbroken democracy, I would say that we are maturing and we are doing well.
All right, sir. All right, sir. Thank you very much for that. So considering your role as the Chairman, House Committee, Rules and Business, so what will you say has been the role of the Committee on Rules and Business in strengthening legislative drafting and review in order to improve quality of legislation?
Our role first is when members propose their bills, we send it for scrutiny. And then it's checked to see for whether there's a resisting law already in place. And if there is none, we go further to check whether it conflicts with any existing law. And then we check for grammar, we check for the legal implication of the words used. After the stage of scrutiny, the legal department will also look at it a little bit. And then if there's a need for that, we invite the the sponsor of the proposed legislation, and then we look at it together with him, the areas we think there should be some adjustments.
Okay.
At this time, we've not even done first reading. The NIRS, the Nigeria Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, have also come to our aid many times in this respect. So when we do the first reading, members get the copy. That's at that stage, we have done the gazetting. So the journal is distributed among honorable members who are expected to have read through, such that by the time it comes for second reading, when we list for second reading, they'll be in a position to interrogate the law, debate the contents, look at the merits and the demerits, the pros and the cons. And at that point, if it's knocked off, it doesn't pass second reading. But if members feel it's okay and it passes second reading, it's referred to the relevant committee. So that's what we do in the process of lawmaking here.
All right, sir. All right, sir. That's a beautiful one. So now, what are the challenges that you can see the legislature faces in ensuring that laws are well structured and aligned to enhance the business environment and, of course, promote economic development in Nigeria?
Well, our first challenge in this 10th Assembly is the issue of the high turnover of lawmakers. The experienced lawmakers that came back in the 10th Assembly will be about 20-something percent. So when you have a huge number, 70-something to 80% being new to Parliament, it becomes a challenge. It's not that these people are not good people. We have university professors, lawyers, medical doctors, civil servants, retired generals, accountants, architects, people of quality education. But there's a way we draft our bills and motions here. And many who come green newly, they can't catch up, So turnover has been a problem. Even for those who coming from state assemblies, we've also had some challenges. So the high turnover has been a major problem. The other problem we've had, but that high turnover, Mr. Speaker, the Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas has done a lot to solve that. There's been a lot of training and retraining. He has engaged civil society organizations, international donor organizations, and there have been trainings and retraining. So that problem is being solved. The other challenge has been the challenge of multiplicity of bills. As we speak in this 10th Assembly, we are not yet 2 years, but we are already about 2,500 proposed bills. The challenge here is you now have some problem of quality and some problem of copy. You now have duplication and all of that. So as a committee, we now need to look carefully, consolidate some, and then some that are cannot just move forward. It ends where it started. So these are the challenges. And sometimes members are very agitated when you discuss the content of their bills and the fact that there need to be some adjustments. So being chairman as Committee on Rules and Business is not a popular one. When somebody who has the same right with you, he won election, he came here, and he thinks that he can just write anything and get it through. And you his colleague, you are equal with him, and you are now telling him that this is not a drafting style, and he gets upset. And then the problem of a listing. Everybody wants to be listed on the same day. And we have this problem more with those who came from the state assemblies. Most of Nigeria's state assemblies are 20, 30 persons. But here you have 360. So if you were speaking every day in your state legislature, when you come here, in a month you might speak only once or zero, because it's 360 for God's sake. So they find it difficult to catch that if you have a turn today, somebody else, you have a turn tomorrow. So that's a challenge. But we are up to the task. We know that we are doing the right thing. And gradually they will get to understand. The older members understand this. And they are able to bear with you when you can't list them. But the new ones, can be difficult, but we are making headways.
Interesting.
Things are getting better.
Interesting. Interesting. So the next question is, considering what you've listed as the role of the Committee on Rules and Business, so does your committee also extend to the aspect of assessing the potential impacts of proposed legislations?
Of course, in the process of scrutiny, you must think about how this will impact society. For instance, you bring in an establishment bill. What comes to my mind first is the cost implication.
Yeah,
the
definitely.
government currently is talking about lean resources. And then the Rosalie reports has complained over the years that most of these agencies can be merged. So why are you bringing a new one?
Yeah.
So we look at all those kind of implications. We also look at the implication in terms of social context. How will it affect people living together? Because the welfare and well-being of the citizens is the primary responsibility of government. And one way government does that is by making laws. So you want to look at how will this law impact if you are placing fines for particular offenses when you are drafting a piece of legislation. You want to know the capability of the people to pay. You want to look at whether this fine itself will be a deterrent so that people don't commit this crime. So we look at all of such areas, the impact on society.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. So, flowing from that, so are there established strategies for post-legislative scrutiny to ensure that the laws actually achieve their intended impacts? And if yes, how are these strategies used to actually measure the successes or otherwise of the laws?
You are not talking about post-legislation.
Yeah.
There are no specifically drawn out timetable and program for post-legislation evaluation.
Okay.
But the system is such that those who are affected by a particular legislation, they usually reach us back to say that this part of it is challenging. Take the PIA, the Petroleum Industry Act. During the passage in the 9th Assembly, that I was privileged to also be a part of, there were consultations with the international oil companies and operators in the oil industry. Yeah, so if you take the PIA, for instance, during the drafting and passage, PIB as it then was, there were interactions between us legislators and the operators in the oil industry. Now that it has been passed, there has also been this feedback from the IOCs and the operators in the oil industry. I'm using that as an example. So they've told us the areas that they're not comfortable with, the areas that impede their business, and the areas that are not clearly defined, the areas that are ambiguous. So they are coming up with proposed amendments, which we are looking forward to. Already, they've had a meeting with the committee and with the committees of petroleum and gas. And there's been a discussion on some of these. So work is going on, for instance, to redraft areas that need to be amended. Once that is done, you see that we'll have an amendment bill to the PIA. So that's the way it flows in every of the laws. Take the Student Loans Act that we also passed in this 10th Assembly. Within a few months of its passage, from the student community, there were discussions, there were reactions. And from government too, there was also reactions. And we had to go back to the drawing board and amend as appropriate. And that has been done. Another example would be the development commissions, regional development commissions that we have legislated upon. One or two of them, or even three, have come back to us for amendment within a month. Because in trying to implement what we drafted, it became obvious that there were some challenges. And the operators and those to be impacted, they cried out. And we are the people's house, so we must listen to them. We are here to do what will be good for our people. And that is how it operates.
Definitely. All right. So you've talked about amendments of legislations. Can you provide insight on how often existing laws in Nigeria are being reviewed and amended, and how this impacts the quality of such legislations?
Again, there's no timetable to say, or the program to say every 5 years we must review a particular law and amend it, except for laws that have sunset clauses. When the sunset comes, you must work on that. And then we also have some archaic laws from the colonial times and from the First Republic. Many of them are being dealt with now. For instance, the tax reform bills is dealing with many of that. And in this 10th Assembly, we've also had to deal with the Audit Ordinance of 1956. So the House of Representatives have passed the audit bill. We're expecting the Senate to give concurrence. So there's no timetable, but as members spot such laws that need amendment, and as agencies that see their enabling act not being up to date, they approach the legislature for amendment. That is what happens from time to time.
Okay, sir. All right, sir. I'd like you to maybe provide insight or maybe just list legislations that you think have impacted the Nigerian business environment significantly, and if this can be tied to the quality of such legislations or perhaps the fact that such legislations just exist.
Again, I will go back to the PIA. You'll find that it has affected the oil industry. All those years that it dragged, there was a slowdown in operations, especially upstream. Investors were not coming in, but as soon as it was passed, and you could see that there's a defined law in place, it attracted investors. That's an example. You look at the electricity reformed bill. You find the changes it has brought in, removing it from the exclusive list to the concurrent. And you find that some state governments are now cashing in on that, and even private investors. So there are many. You take the Minimum Wage Act that we passed in this assembly. Many lives are now being impacted as it's being implemented. And you find the number of private organizations also adjusting their pay structure. And you find that it's also affecting livelihoods. I'm glad recently that people have said that in the last few months, inflation has not been rising. So some are of the view that it has been static, but some of us believe that it's gradually going down. And that is good for our economy. And that's because of the legislation we've put in place, the policies, the benchmarks in our budget, the Minimum Wage Act, and all the legislations that we have done that has seen to it that the cost of living is gradually reducing, as low as it is, ensuring that the standard of living of the average Nigerian is improved. Is improved.
All right, sir. All right, sir. Thank you very much for that. So the next question is: are there any strategies or key priorities, or perhaps international best practices that you feel the Nigerian legislature can adopt in order to help enhance quality of legislations?
What we do from time to time is that, and it's a worldwide practice, there is a peer review, exchange programs between legislatures. In this 10th Assembly, we have been to a committee level. That's how it operates. Yeah. We've had legislators from Kenya, from Ghana, from other countries, Britain. They've come here to see what we are doing, and we have exchanged views. We have also visited the legislature of South Africa, Rwanda, Morocco. We've gone to a number of places, the US, and they've also been here. So that exchange program, we check what is obtainable. For instance, when the Ghanaians came here, they told us that the chairman rules on business is part of the leadership structure of their parliament. But here, the 10 leaders, principal officers, chairman rules on business is not actually one of the 10. So we find that difference. Yeah. Then we try to study the impact it has on their legislation and how it impacts on our system, impacts on our legislation. And we find that rules and business now becomes a bridge between leadership and the followership, So that's the practice. But we've not really gone abroad to pick what is done whole scale elsewhere. Because in many countries, there's differences in the way the legislature operates. In Britain and Canada, you have the parliamentary system.
Yeah.
So that people who are in the parliament are also in the executive arm of government.
Yeah.
But in the US and in Nigeria, legislature is stricto sensu legislature. So you can't be a member of Congress and you're also a
member of the executive.
A member of the executive, a secretary of state or something, or minister, as the case in Nigeria. But then if you go to a country like Ghana and South Africa, there is a hybrid. It's not strictly speaking parliamentary, neither is it strictly speaking presidential.
Yeah.
They now add their local content, as it were, to spice up their democracy in such a way that fits their own local environment. Yeah. That is what you find in South Africa and in Ghana and some other countries. So we learn from these, and they also learn from us. Yeah. But we can't copy anyone wholesale. As it is.
True, to fit the environment. All right, so thank you very much for that. So lastly, how can the collaboration between the executive, legislature, and judiciary enhance the effectiveness of laws, particularly in driving business growth and national development?
Now, you know, in this issue of lawmaking, the three arms of government are interwoven. There's this doctrine of separation of powers. For instance, the legislature, we make the law. The executive implement the law, while the judiciary interpret the law. And there are cases where the judiciary, in the exercise of their functions, push a step into legislative functions and seem to make laws, like the recent Supreme Court judgment on the local government you know. And there are also times when the executive seem to step into our terrain and bring up executive orders, and we seem to be more of legislation. And there are also times too when we as legislature, we seem to perform executive functions when we perform our oversight duties. And then we give some instructions, as it were. Yeah. And the agencies will be like, you don't have that right to give that instruction. But if we have made a law, particularly the appropriation law, and you are not abiding by it, we have a responsibility to call you to order. Sure. So there's this, the divide is not as thin and as clear as it appears. But so there's therefore that need for the collaboration between the three, such that there will be mutual understanding and a work for the betterment of our people, such that when the legislature is able to say that the chief executive of so and so agency is not doing the right thing, the head of the executive should listen and drop that chief executive. That kind of collaboration is useful. Yeah. And when the executive also brings in a piece of legislation to us, we should also be able to look at it dispassionately in national interest for the good of the common man. Yeah. So in that way, there must be that collaboration. But Nigerians would always want a fight. Collaboration is different from fighting, and fighting really is not democracy, it's not governance. When two elephants fight, the grass suffers. So there must be that hand stretch across the divide to understand the other party and do everything in national interest and for the good of the common man.
Wow, thank you very much, sir, for the detailed explanation and for, of course, taking us through the impact and the effectiveness of legislative quality, especially as it affects the business environment and, of course, national development. We greatly appreciate your time, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.